Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our show. We are having a very interesting and wonderful conversation with Father Nathan Castle, who help stuck souls transition from a state of perpetual overthinking to the other side. You explain, Father.
It's the afterlife for sure because they have died. I followed the near death experience from the 70s when Raymond Moody first wrote Life After Life. And I belong to IANS, the International Association for Near Death Studies. And so I've been interested in what's it actually like for individual persons to die. Because sometimes when we think about the afterlife in Christian circles, sometimes it's those silly streets of gold or harps or church services that go on forever or whatever. And sometimes the specificity, the uniqueness of each person's movement from this life to the next sort of gets lost in these kind of generic categories. So um, they're and they don't often use the language of purgatory or heaven. Um, they're just in a place, that's all, and they're moving to another place.
Sounds good to me. Can I get you to hold up your books? Father Nathan is the author of
That one,
Afterlife Interrupted. He has it on Kindle and Audible, which
yeah.
I listen to both books, and they are
The
fascinating.
second one looks like the first. It just has a big number two in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then over my shoulder, can you see my first book, and Toto 2, The Wizard of Oz as a spiritual adventure?
Yeah.
That one does. Dorothy has a near-death experience. She gets hit in the head with debris from a tornado, and then she has this out-of-body.
Oh, I never related that.
Yeah, at the end of the movie, in the last 5 minutes, she gets back to Kansas and she's laying in a bed. And the last guy she saw before she got hit in the head was that carnival guy,
Mhm.
Professor Marvel. He comes to the window and says, "Hey, what's this I hear about the little girl who got caught in a storm?" And Uncle Henry says, "Yeah, she got a pretty good bump on her head. For a minute there, we thought we were gonna lose her."
Wow.
Uh, so it was a near death. So anyway, I use that story, especially for people that have disaffiliated with churches and synagogues and stuff and don't listen to collective stories anymore. They don't know
Hmm.
the same story language,
Hmm.
but lots of people know the Wizard of Oz. So I use the Wizard of Oz as a story. You can sing the first three notes of any of the songs and people will join in. And so it's already inside them, and you can kind of draw out lessons that are spiritual lessons that are embedded in that story.
I wanted to talk about the story of Cheryl Lynn. Um,
Oh, yeah.
um, she was handicapped by a car accident.
Yes, when she was
And
24.
yes, and what's fascinating to me about that story is when she was asked, "Who would you like to help transition you?" She came up with her physical therapist,
Yes,
and it just
Estelle.
made me it just reminded me of how much of an impact we can make, of all the people she knew, all the family and the friends. She wanted to see the physical therapist because she was so positive. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and the way that Cheryl Lynn talked about it, I don't know if she and Estelle was the physical therapist's name. I don't know if they ever did one-on-one because she only spoke about group therapy. Um, Maybe they also did one-on-one, but the way that she spoke about it was group therapy. Well, in short, she was in college, she was living with her boyfriend, she was very athletic and even had some aspirations for a career in sports. She was studying communications, and she was in a vehicle. She was a passenger in a vehicle that was in a wreck. The driver died. She did not die. She said half of me did. She
Mm,
was paralyzed from the waist down.
mm,
And then she had to do, her boyfriend left her because he didn't want to be with a paraplegic girlfriend. she she did lots of physical therapy to try to gain back whatever she could. She said, it's not that I didn't see some improvement, because I did, but I never walked again. And then she said, once you're bound to a wheelchair, you're bound to other people, dependence upon other people. As much as you want to be independent, there are very specific limits. There are lots of things you can't do, and you have to wait for somebody else to do them on their own schedule. She's not a very patient person, and kind of had an attitude. And even when she came through, she was sort of mad at us. And I just said, well, remember, Missy, you're the one that sought us out. You don't have to put up with us if you don't want to. And she said, all right, I know. And I said, okay, well, we'll work with you. We'll do the best we can. And she said, oh, no, not afterlife physical therapy. And my friend Laura had to say, well, not exactly. It's not as rigorous as that. But there are some things that it sounds like you need to do. And we'll try to help you figure out what they are and do them. So what happened to her was that from that time she was in her accident at 24, she died at the age of 36. And she said, I was dependent upon dial-a-ride to go anywhere. She said most of the time they were late. And she said, but this one day, the dial-a-ride guy was putting me in the back of a van with a lift, and something went wrong. The lift malfunctions or whatever, but I flipped over and landed on my head and died in the street. And she was so angry that she, in 36 years, could have two such episodes that caused her to be paraplegic and then die in the street, that she wanted there to be no more life.
Mm.
She wasn't suicidal, but sometimes people who are suicidal just want everything to stop completely.
Mm-hmm.
And because of their pain. And when she discovered that there was yet more life, she was not happy about that. So, well, we couldn't change her whole, mental attitude, but she's the one that came to us. And I've learned that nobody comes to us until they have been vetted on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
Their care team, their helpers, their guardian won't let them in our line until they are ready. But sometimes people are just barely ready. And Sherilyn was just barely ready. And she had this attitude, and we just had to say, you go and be any way you want. We'll help you unless you tell us to stop. And so we did. And she started talking about some of the therapy, and she said most of the time it was people that had an hour, and they'd come in with their clipboard or their charts or their video or something, and they did their jobs. And then she said, but Estelle, when it was her turn, she used the word swan as a verb. She swanned into the room, like she was on a stage, like she was a ballet dancer. And she'd have all these movements that were like art, and she'd have us do whatever she was doing. And there was a method behind it, but it never felt clinical. It always felt artistic, and the time went by quickly. And then one day she came in and she told us before the lesson or the session began that she had received bad medical news, that she had been diagnosed with an advanced stage cancer. But she promised that she would stay with us, and she would always tell us the truth. And and so at the beginning of each subsequent session, she would give a little health update, and we could see that she was getting weaker, but she was modeling for us how to push through and do whatever it was your body could be pushed to do. And so she kept doing that. She was faithful to being with them until she reached the point where she was too ill to come in, and people explained that her, she was worse. And then they told us that she had died. So she said, if we said, can you think of anybody that you'd like to have come and help? She said, anybody. And I think I said, or my partner said, well, it has to be somebody that has already died. And she said, yeah, I got that part. And uh, um, she said, well, if the whole point of it is somebody that could help me move, the person that all did nothing but try to help me move was Estelle. And so I'd like to have Estelle come for me. And so all we had to do, and I don't make a great big display, even though I'm a Catholic priest. I don't have to do long, complicated prayers. I can just say, God, would you please, if she's available, would you let Estelle know that Sherilyn would like to see her? And it never takes more than 10 seconds. And that's what happened. And she said, oh my, there. And she said, oh, and somehow she made an entrance. She said she always did make an entrance. She didn't just walk or appear. Somehow she swanned into the room. And so anyway, they didn't stay very long. They just thanked us and left. And
I love that. I love that story. And just again, the reminder of that the impact lingers on even after physical form. I wanted to talk about a few of the truths that you came to understand, that you talked about in the book, that we will always be,
yes.
that no one dies alone, that you and your freedom will be respected.
Hmm.
You will leave behind all physical pain when you transition, when we transition, and we will heal from all emotional and spiritual pain. Even if it takes a while, we will heal.
And we'll heal at the pace that we allow ourselves to do so.
Yes. Yes. And I thought that was important to include for, again, all of us. There are people, Father, who are afraid of, as you know, afraid of death. There are people who are tortured by the thought that their family members suffered significantly.
Yeah.
They died of a violent death. And
May I interject right there?
absolutely.
Um, One of the things that I've seen again and again is that uh, people who did, fly through a windshield as they died, or bodies were burned beyond recognition, or something like that. Very often they say, "I know that happened to my body, but I wasn't in it at the time."
Yes. That's exactly what I wanted you to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it might comfort somebody that's hearing this, to be able to reimagine what the last moments of a loved one's experience might have been if they had an awful trauma to the body. That I often have heard, well, yes, yes, that happened, but I was already out of body by the time that happened.
And that is consistent with all of the other sources of information I've heard. That the soul, of course, the soul knows what's going to happen, and the soul leaves the body before all of that. So
And from a lot of the ones that I've dealt with, it was their guardian who pulled them out of the body
nice.
before. You know, do you remember the lady that died? Uh, Claire, the lady that died in a home invasion.
Yes, you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, she was an elderly lady who lived alone. I think it was on a dirt road in the woods. I think it was in the Pacific Northwest, but wherever it was, she was very thin and frail, and she had fallen and cracked a rib, and she was mostly living on her couch, and neighbors were bringing her food, or baked goods or vegetables from their gardens and stuff, and she'd given somebody a key to her house, and she was dozing in the afternoon, late afternoon, I think, and heard a rustling at the door and thought, "Wait a minute, I didn't expect anybody. Wonder if I forgot." But there was a couple of people who she thought might have been on drugs and
Mm-hmm.
were invading her home. And when she realized that she didn't know them and that they had just walked right in her house, she said, "I tried to rouse myself and defend my home." And she said, maybe that wasn't such a good idea, but that's what I did at the time. And I think all the man had to do was push me over, and that was it. That was the end of me. And she hit the floor, and then she said, she said, "I was a Christian woman, but I'd stopped going to church because I was just so ill that it was too difficult."
Mm-hmm.
But she said, "It's not that I didn't believe I had a guardian angel. I just didn't pay that much attention to it." But then here he was, and he pulled me out of that scene and put me between my roof and the canopy of tree branches above my roof. And then he said, "You're safe here with me." And what I want you to do is pretend you're a dog that just went swimming, and I want you to shake off everything that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to cling to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so she did that. And then she said the next thing he said was, uh, let's get out of here. It's unpleasant, which is pretty understated for the scene where you were just murdered.
Yes,
Let's get
yes.
out of here. It's unpleasant.
Unpleasant.
And so he said, "Would you get on my back and we'll fly out?" And she had a little thought, a flashback of a television show she'd seen about tandem skydiving, where somebody jumps out of a plane. I understand that it's not on the back of. I think it's really more on the belly of. Uh, I thought it was on the back, but anyway, you're somehow joined with a person that knows what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and you both jump out of a plane. And she said it felt like that, and I would never in my life have jumped out of a plane. But I didn't have a lot of options, and he was kind, and so I did what he said, and I got on his back, and he flew me out of there. And then when it came time for the crossing part, we said, well, the reason you're here is to move along. And can you think of anybody that you know who died before you did, who loved you? And she said, absolutely, I know exactly who it is. It's my sister Celie. She died as a young woman, and I've been talking to her photograph for 40 years. And she said, I would like it to be her. So we said a little prayer, and she said, oh, look at there. Doesn't she look like a little tart? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, she died during the days when women had to be real thin to be a stewardess. They wouldn't let you be a stewardess if you weren't female and really thin. And she said she's showing up, and she was struggling with the word epaulette, those things on the shoulder of a military uniform or a band uniform, the little
Mm-hmm.
tassels on it. She said she's in a uniform. She looks like a little captain with a little epaulettes and a little tight belt around her waist and her little cap. And she's at the top of those stairs that you have to climb on the old time planes when you had to land on the ground and walk up into the stairs to get into the plane. She said she's up at the top in her little uniform, and she's got a tray with an umbrella drink for me. And she's she says it's just girls having fun. She's just being silly because she always wished she would be able to do that, and she never did. And
Father, what was Claire's reason for getting stuck? Was it?
I think it was just the abruptness of being murdered in your home.
Yeah,
And she also had gotten used to inactivity
yeah,
as she was old and frail.
yeah,
And yes, you get to leave behind an old, frail body, but if you got in the habit of being pretty inactive, you have to reactivate.
yes,
There's nothing automatic about that. You have to choose to get up and get moving.
yes.
And she did, but she just kind of took it slowly.
Is there any other stories you wanted to talk about, Father? And on the chat, uh, Brittany said, beautiful story.
It is a beautiful story,
We
Brittany,
just
isn't it?
talked about, yes.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a favorite of mine. It's just so cheerful at the end. And how can being murdered in your home have such a happy ending? But it can, and it does. And I just believe in the cosmic happy ending.
yes.
I, I I believe and trust that somehow we're all on our way home. And uh, I want to, at least my podcast is called Joyful Friar, because my spiritual father, Saint Dominic, that was his nickname. And I believe in joyful hope, that we wait in joyful hope for the manifestation of all God is doing.
I wanted to maybe, in the vein of releasing uh, the torture of thinking people suffered, I wanted to talk about Lucille.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because
Calm like fire.
yes, right.
Yeah.
And we hear that people died in a fire. Like really, the mind really runs away at that point and really feels like, oh my God, images comes to mind. And so I thought that that story was important to share.
Just so you know, she tapped on me right away. She let me know she's right here.
Hey,
She's
Lucille.
she's a sweetheart.
Oh,
She died, I think, at 83. But nobody has to stay old. But her story was the way she presented the dream. was I was waking up in the night, and I looked at my bedroom window, and there were all these unusually beautiful colors that I'd never seen out the window. And I got up and I looked out the window to see that I was inside a wildfire.
Mm.
She was so surprised because she didn't live in a canyon or in a place that she thought was particularly vulnerable. But she said we had been in a drought for years. All the trees in the neighborhood were so dry, and they didn't allow us to water except every other day. You could get fined for washing your car or watering the lawn or anything. And she said the fire danger was just so high. And she said, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was an old woman in my house slippers and my house coat. And when I realized that I was in a wildfire, I quickly thought of options. I could grab the car keys and make a run for it. I could run out onto the driveway and try to make it into the car. And she just thought, I don't like my chances. I'm an old woman in house slippers. I, I don't think leaving my house is the thing to do. And then she had seen, television stories about tornadoes and wildfires that skip across the street, and all the houses are burned on this side, but the one over here is fine. And she just hoped that would be the case. And so she said, I didn't want to run around the house like a crazy woman and scare the cats. So she got her cats and she said, come sit by me, or come sit in my lap. We're going to sit here in the rocker and we're going to see how this turns out. And she said, I don't know how wildfires work, but I wonder if the fire ate up all the oxygen in the air because I passed out. And I never got an answer to that. I never knew who to ask. Is that the way wildfires work? Can they actually take the oxygen out of the air before they burn, or I don't know what? But anyway, she said she went unconscious, and that was it. That she said it's true that my body uh, was burned, but I wasn't in it at the time. And she said it's a shame because my house burned to the ground and I had nice things. And even though I was old, some people would have intended to inherit something nice of mine. And now everything that I had, even things that survived, have some sort of, you know, uh, damage to them. And who would want a reminder of that in their house? So she was sad that the things that she left behind, none of them got to be enjoyed by anybody else, her heirs. But she said, I would never have thought that dying in a wildfire could be so simple.
Yes. And there
And
you go, everyone. It doesn't have to be, a torturous thought.
was the same thing. Her guardian, helped her out of the body and got her to safety and explained. Sometimes they'll say, do you understand that you've been in a car accident and that you didn't survive it? Do you understand that you're safe right here, that you're not in danger, that you're in a safe place, and I'm keeping you safe? And that's consistent. I see that happen again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And then if people can allow that to be the main thing in their imagination, they can move on more freely. But somebody like Paul, all he could think about was he had just killed 4 people, including himself. And he needed to, that was the thing in the forefront of his imagination. And I've studied Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, and they both teach that nothing can come to be, nothing can exist until it first existed in the imagination of its maker.
Wow.
So I'm looking at the wall behind you, and there's different pieces of framed art on the wall. Somebody, did you do those?
I did you are the first person to ask, Father.
Is that right?
I did the Buddha, which I love. And then this young lady with the ponytails behind her
Yeah.
did that.
Uh-huh.
I do my hand in a little
Did they turn out the way that you liked them? Are you
they
pleased with
did.
them? You probably wouldn't have them on the wall if you didn't, if you weren't
Yeah.
pleased with it. I was an art student too. And you first have an image in your mind about what the thing is that you want to have happen on the canvas, or the pottery or whatever. But incidentally, the thing in the middle is the medium.
Yes. Yeah.
The paint or the
Mm-hmm.
clay is
Mm-hmm.
the media of an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I don't allow myself to be described as a medium, I really don't think the word in and of itself needs to be all loaded up with demonic stuff. It just means to be in the middle. And anyway, but nothing can come to be until it's first been imagined. And so a person like Paul, all he would allow himself to imagine was himself killing four people.
Yeah.
And until he could kind of turn the page, or or say, let's solve the algebra problem, you need to change the imagination. And
Yes.
sometimes it's a matter of just saying, yes, that really is awful, but now there's a new opportunity, and let's turn the page.
Um, I'm glad you brought up the term medium. I actually did a session on that, Father, about how whoever, whenever, but how we've been conditioned to think that the word channel and medium are curse words. And it's and I'm not going to talk at length about this, but Jesus received information from non-physical, high vibrational beings, his guides and angels, and so his
And Moses and Elijah on the Mount of the Transfiguration, they had been dead for centuries when Jesus talked to them.
yes. So I think, in my humble opinion, that it was the agenda was for us to not be able to communicate with source and to cut that off, because then we would be in a space of powerlessness and would need structures to save us, quote unquote. But that's just my own thing. But it is not a bad thing to be in a high enough vibration to communicate with the angels and archangels and ascended masters. It's a beautiful thing, and I just wanted to say that on this platform, it's a beautiful thing. And while we're on that topic, Father, because I read the books, your engagement with your friend Matthew, I think was his
Oh,
name,
Matt. Yeah, Matt.
Matt, and when you all traveled somewhere
To the
and
Grand Canyon.
you spoke, I'll
Yeah,
say you spoke, God spoke through you. I thought that was so beautiful, and I
yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
That was the first time that had ever happened. I think we had just graduated college. I think we were 22 years old. And he was trying to decide whether to propose marriage to his girlfriend. And he was chickening out of going into ministry. And I was thinking about doing it. We had a lot to sort out. And we just thought we'd go into the desert and seek God's will, because that's what it says in scripture, that people go out into the desert to talk to God. So that's what we did. And then God spoke through me to him.
That was powerful. That was impactful.
I
Um,
had no idea that was going to happen, but when it did, and then if you remember, God referred to him as Milton in the
yeah.
middle of it, and I didn't even know that was his actual given name because he never used it. But he was made to feel ashamed that his name was stupid,
Mm,
and so he changed his name from Milton to Matt
mhm,
because Matt sounded cool.
mhm. And so there was confirmation for you.
Yeah, it was. It
Yeah,
just because I had no idea of that at all.
yeah. I did want to talk about, because you talked about, again, you revisited how our thoughts created an experience for us. And what struck me is the story of Virgil,
Uh,
uh, and cousin Arturo.
Arturo, yeah.
But one of the angels made a statement that I love. He or she or whomever said, we begin losing freedom when we lose track of the truth. And it is so true. When
Mhm.
we go into a thought process, like, right? And I think in this case, Virgil just thought, like, what's the point? Like, I'm useless. This is useless. Life is useless. And we lose our freedom.
Yes, we do.
And that was excellent. And for I guess for the viewers, you can go into what happened with Virgil.
Yeah,
Rob.
that one happened right at the beginning of the pandemic
Mhm,
when the shutdowns happened and when we were scared to death breathing after anybody could kill you. And
mm,
um, that we had to wipe down the groceries, all that stuff.
I
Uh,
never did that, Father. I know.
I never did either,
I
but
had friends who did.
remember we had to we couldn't we the church that I lived next to was just locked up tight as a drum, and we had to do all the services online, and we didn't even know how to do that. We had to learn how to live stream everything. It was so complicated. But anyway, Arturo had he was walking down a street at night, and a man on drugs hit him in the head with a brick and
Mm-hmm.
killed him. And so he died violently, and he came to us, and when it was time for him to move, we asked him, can you think of anybody? And he said, well, it would be my cousin Arturo. They had both grown up Hispanic men in families that had not had anyone go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And they both found community college programs that yielded well-paying jobs. And Arturo had learned how to do some medical technician thing. He got certification and said he wore medical scrubs, and he worked in a profession, and he was admired by all the rest of the family members as improving himself and such. And then he died in a car crash. But his funeral, most of their family funerals were that. They were just mostly family members, maybe a few neighbors. And he said, but his funeral was all these people that were going on about how they admired him and so on. And he was amazed that a member of his family could be held in such high regard.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't too long after that that he died. And he said, so I do know somebody that's died, and it would be my cousin Arturo. So when he showed up, it was when the news was full of ventilators.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how there was all this panic about we need more and more ventilators or people will die. And I use one of those CPAP machines to sleep, because of apnea. And mine is the super duper kind. I have bad sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about taking the little machine that I use and turning that into a machine that could keep some COVID person alive. Anyway, when his cousin showed up, he showed up uh, against a backdrop of a wall full of ventilators and what is it, 95, 91 masks, whatever
Yeah,
those
your
search.
K95 masks. Yeah.
Uh, and
N95, yeah.
what he was trying to communicate was there's no scarcity of any healing thing here. Everything needed for healing is here in abundance.
I love it.
And then he ended up, his cousin said to him that the earth is sending us a lot more people than normal because of this virus, and that they die in two ways. Some of them just get so feverish that they fall into a coma and slip away in their sleep. But he said other people can't catch their breath, and they're in a panic because they can't breathe, and they die gasping. And those ones, we have to help them after they've died to realize that they're okay. And sometimes they keep gasping for a while. And so it says we need to treat, they don't really need to catch their breath anymore, but they think they do. And so we bring them into what looks like a hospital, and we put them on ventilators because that's what they think they need. And so we let them do that for a while until they realize that they're safe, and that that there's no bugs, they're not in any danger anymore, and they can kind of calm down. And so he said that he had no medical training at all, but his cousin Arturo said there's lots of things that you could do to help right now. So why don't you just stay here with me for a while while you can be my assistant, and then later on you can move on and do something else.
I love it. And I know you referenced another person, I don't know their name, that was in the hospital. They had passed on and they were in the hospital on the other side, and they thought, how did I get rich? because the hospital had all these resources that they were never able to benefit from. And
Yeah, I'm struggling with which one that was because I've had that happen a number of times. One of them was a man that I think was Colombian and was poor. And had he ever gone to a hospital, it would have not had clean sheets.
right.
It would have been, nasty. And he said, I couldn't, I'm here and everything is nice and clean. And he just felt like he must have become rich somehow. And he didn't realize that it was all free. Uh,
So when our loved ones pass on, everyone, there is a loving place waiting on them. And even if they don't want the help and the presence, it's still there.
It is, and some people who are left behind by the death, a violent or abrupt death of a loved one, sometimes it comes because of drug abuse
Mhm.
or mental illness. And sometimes when there's been mental illness for years or addiction for years, it can be hard for loved ones to even remember your sibling or your child as whole and healthy.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
it's hard to imagine that they have uh, moved on to something that's not even darker and more painful than what they had already.
Right.
And so sometimes I end up doing Zoom counseling with people just to say, first, please read my book first. Don't ask for an appointment where I have to tell you stuff that you could have learned already by just reading a book or listening to it. Not that I'm trying to sell one more book. I have a vow of poverty and it's not about money, but but the but it's not necessary to think that you need to be in a panic because your child has died and now I have to somehow rescue them in the afterlife. And sometimes I'll get these kind of panicky emails saying, "Help me, help me, help me! My son is he's stuck." And
Mhm.
uh, I try to talk people down and say, "Wait a minute, there's all kind of help, and you don't have to feel like this is all on you. That they'll be cared for."
Mm. Again, this is a very small population of people who do die of violent deaths that do get stuck. But God is with us always.
Yes, and even for people like we started out with Ray, who was mad at God.
Mm.
Well, do you remember the story about the Baptist minister that was killed and was
John
drowned?
the Baptist.
Yeah, John the
Mhm.
Baptist. We That's not his real name, but in brief, he was murdered by his wife's boyfriend, um, and drowned. And he didn't know he woke up in something like a nice hospital. That's a theme that runs through a lot of these.
Mm.
And it's not always like flat on your back in a hospital bed. Sometimes it's more like some posh spa, I don't know, like the Betty Ford Clinic or something like that, some place where rich people go to detox or whatever. It's just he was in a place like that.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, what was I saying? I forgot.
Just how they're never alone. Our loved ones are never.
No, they're always surrounded by help. But in the case of John the Baptist, he 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 was helped by so many different people, and one of them he said, "When am I going to see Jesus?"
Yes, that's significant. Yes.
Because he said, that maybe some of your audiences knows some Christian hymnody, but there's a song called "The In the Everlasting Arms."
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
an
Mm-hmm.
image of dying and being in the everlasting arms of Jesus, uh, being hugged or carried or something. Uh, maybe like the Good Shepherd, Jesus carrying the lost sheep or whatever. That's what he had in mind. He said, "When am I going to meet Jesus?" And somebody had to explain to him, "Well, don't you remember that after he died, he sent the Holy Spirit and it went into everybody that wanted it? And now he's in all of us. You've been seeing him all along. It's just that you're seeing him look like me or like that person or that one. But
Mm.
if you really want to have that experience of the man with the beard and the toga and the sandals and things, we'll get you ready for that." So he was also going to have that too, because it would give him joy. But he
Yeah,
said,
that was funny because he was like, wait a minute, I hadn't seen Jesus yet. It's a problem. I was,
well, and he said, it's like they took me back to Christian preschool. They had to teach me what I already knew.
yeah.
That yes, of course he's in everybody, and we'll have him. And I, but they also said, well, if you want that other experience too, we'll get you ready for it.
Father, that was, let me tell you, there are a couple of chilling stories. And that was one of the chilling stories. Him being murdered by his wife's boyfriend. Another chilling story. The only reason why I want to talk about it is because I really would like to address the subject of suicide, right?
Hmm.
And we you had two dreams, and you had two people send one dream, but it was two for one,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And but I wanted to talk about that, just to talk about, even in the case of suicide, there is no straight to hell unless the person wanted to send themselves to hell. But even in those cases, they are still assisted by loving beings, by their guides. Did you want to say a little about that?
Yeah, that dream is that those stories are at the end of book two.
Mm-hmm.
They came in one dream. You called it a two for one. Uh, they were both from the late 20s, somewhere in the 30s, maybe even the early 40s. But a lot of the elements in it were from that time period.
Mm-hmm.
And one was a man and one was a woman. Uh, one was a man who called himself Leaper because he jumped out a window to his death.
Yeah.
And for a while, he didn't even want to give us a name. And he never really did in the end. We kind of made one up for him. My
Mm-hmm.
sister, Catherine, helped with that one. And uh, he showed me I was in a building and I was with people, and a man got into the elevator. And at the last second, I got in with him, and then it fell uh, in a way that would have killed us. And I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there was a woman. I don't remember all the details of her part of the dream, but I knew I was in a big band singer thing, those, like, I've been listening to the 40s channel on Sirius XM with all that big band
Okay,
music, a lot
okay.
of like, a lot of clarinets and,
Mhm.
Bing Crosby and stuff from the 40s, or in the car recently. I've just been listening to that. And it was from that period. And she was given the name BEA,
Mhm.
uh, which was not her real name, and she was the only woman in an all male big
Mhm.
band thing.
Mhm.
She was only 18 when they discovered her, and they took her on the road. And she stayed at first with like boarding houses that were run by matronly women. And eventually, they just told her just stay in the hotel with us, but they had a key to her room. She'd never had sex. She'd never dated anybody. She was only
Mhm.
18 when she, started out on the road. And she just tried, she was assaulted in her hotel room, if not nightly, very often. And she just tried to put it out of her mind because these were her coworkers and bosses.
Yeah.
And she felt stuck. She
Mhm.
couldn't leave it. She felt like she couldn't leave it.
Yeah.
And then uh, she described an evening of entertainment. She said we would start we did supper clubs where people were mostly there to have dinner and drinks and conversation, and so we did music in the background, soft music. And
Mhm.
then she said after, like on dessert or stuff, we would maybe get them onto the dance floor. Then afterwards we might sing about broken romances or longing for
Mhm.
what was and so on. And then she said at the end of the night, they were usually sexier songs about "Wish I Could Go Home with You." You know that song, that winter song. What's that one that
It's cold outside.
maybe it's cold outside.
Yes, I
She's
love
like,
that song. Yeah.
well, you remember when it got re-recorded a few years ago? It was controversial because the woman is saying no, but the man keeps going, and so advocates about safety and women's safety in particular
Hmm.
criticized it, but she said that at the end of the evening, it was that kind of songs and that
Mhm.
tone. And she said,
Mhm.
I'd never been in a romance before, but I was sexually active against my will on a regular basis, but I'd never dated anybody and I'd never been in a romance. And then she said, I got pregnant and I couldn't have possibly known by who. And I couldn't go
Mm.
home and say, I don't know who the father of this baby is and stuff. And she said they had guns and she just decided I couldn't wait much longer. I was going to start to show. I didn't even dare talk to a woman about being pregnant.
Mhm.
And she said they had guns and one was available. And I asked her, did you ever use the word suicide to describe your death? And she said, nobody's ever asked me that. And I
Mhm.
said, well, how do you speak of it? And she said, I took matters into my own hands. That was important. And she didn't want to talk to me if I was going to shame her because I was a priest. And I said, I'm not in the shame business. and, and all I'm trying to do is help you. And you came to me. So I'm just listening to your story is all I'm doing.
Mhm. Um, a couple of things when I was listening to book two, and you got into this story about B. What hit it just hit me like I literally gasped when when you said that they just all of the band members just kind of she was at their disposal. So
Yeah.
it wasn't even one of those things where she was assaulted one time. I guess after that assault, whoever did that went and told the other ones, and they just kind of assumed that, we come anytime. And so what I felt as a woman is the degree of powerlessness that must have felt like.
And she was so young and so
Yes.
inexperienced. And she thought that she wasn't, the fact that she didn't report it or put a stop to it made her kind of guilty.
Mm,
That's not uncommon for people that have been
right.
through sexual
Yes.
assault to blame themselves. And she did something like that. But she did it on a kind of practical level that her experience was that if she just let them do what they wanted to do and get it over with, they'd leave. And so if she just let them have their way, it'd be over faster. She would clean herself up, go to sleep, and get up the next day and then pretend it hadn't happened
Yeah.
and then talk about tonight's show. And
Yeah. It
that was
that hurt. That hit. It definitely hit me. But I do love, I'll say this. She sounded very assertive, Father,
yes.
as a spirit when you all, and by the way, Father, I know you've said this, but Father Nathan, they are very specific about asking the souls if they can use their information, their story in the book.
Yeah.
They go through that process.
Yes. And we certainly did with those.
Yeah.
Always. Always.
And when you asked B if you all could use the story, she sounded assertive, and her thing was, as long as this is not like a tale of you better not do this kind of thing. I just liked that it felt like she had gotten to the process where she was stepping into her power.
I think it was she who asked during her care. Remember, by the time my prayer partners and I are involved, there's been a whole lot of care that's preceded us
Mm-hmm.
knowing about it. Uh, she she was with somebody in her care team. It was more than one person, and uh, it, the information that she had taken her life was the topic, and uh, she uh, um, she was told, we were not where you were. We did not go through what you went through, but we're here with you now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the way they said, uh, what you chose to do is really not pertinent to the work that we're here to do. Here to help you heal, and the things that preceded it are not our concern.
Wow.
Because you don't need us to be concerned with them. Not that they're disinterested,
Yeah.
but we were not where you were. We did not go through what you went
Yeah.
through, but we're here with you now.
Yes. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People wonder sometimes because a lot of Christian people have been brought up with the idea of what sometimes in the Catholic Church gets called particular judgment. The
Mm,
idea that at the moment of your death, you're
mm,
judged on the spot.
mm,
And I was just before a panel of guys in my own brotherhood, and I said to them, yes, but judging presumes competence on the part of the judged person in order to take part in the proceeding.
mm,
If for example, if a person is thought to be insane, they're not they're not in a courtroom. They're not being judged.
mhm.
Uh, or if a person were too ill yet to take part in their judgment, it would be deferred until a time when they were healthier.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
uh, and so there some of them kind of pushing back and saying, but wait a minute, this doesn't line up with our with what we've been taught. I'm just saying, well, but if you think about it, if they're in the near death experience, people do talk about um, the what's sometimes called a 360 review. Are you
Mhm,
familiar with that?
mhm, mhm,
Maybe some of your audience is not. A lot of people that have had near death experiences talk about being surrounded by or floating in love
mhm.
and shown scenes from their life for better or worse of how their behavior affected other people.
Mhm.
So the worst was if you gossiped about someone or somehow demeaned someone, that you were brought back into that scene, except you had to feel what it felt like to be the other people in it,
Yes.
not you.
Yes.
Uh, and you got to feel the sting of your words. So
Mhm,
your nose wasn't rubbed in it, and you're not shamed or even sentenced to some afterlife prison. You're
mhm.
just shown the truth that's larger than what you were able to understand.
Yes. Yeah.
And then once you saw it from another's point of view, then you could go, oh, okay, now I get it. Or now I understand that I have some work to do. Sometimes people in the afterlife, like Paul, he was interested in meeting the other three people whose lives ended because of his mistake behind the wheel. And he was told, not yet.
Yeah.
They're not ready. And for anybody that's been through AA or any of the 12-step programs, sometimes when people get a little bit of sobriety, especially with their sponsor, you come to a level where you can begin to try to do restitution,
Mhm.
try to make up for damage that you've done to other people while you were under the influence. And there's discernment about whether, for example, if somebody took a restraining order out against you because of the danger you posed to them while you were drinking and drugging, you don't have the right to talk to them.
Mhm.
um, and and sometimes it's just not it's not you're not ready or you're not ready. I've and several times I've seen people judge themselves uh, too prematurely or too harshly, and they're just told, Loretta, that's a noble idea, but hold that thought. We'll let you know when it's time for that.
Yes. Yes. This has been a very rich conversation, Father. Are there any other story? Of course, I have tons of stories, but we don't
Well,
have.
there's 26 that are in the two books, and we've covered a lot of them in a couple of
Yes,
hours.
yes.
I'm working on a next book in that series because I have so many stories that are not shared, but I would have to go back and get their permission, and I just haven't done it yet. But there are others I'd like to tell soon.
Have you thought about so what I've heard, Father, is on the other side, and you talk about it in your books where we continue to learn.
Absolutely.
I've heard that we even learn how to do energy work, or we continue to evolve. Have you thought about doing like I don't know, a 5-year follow-up, a 10-year follow-up to see what these beings are now? Because a lot of times when we're on the other side, our purpose continues in terms of helping folks who are still in physical form. But just a follow up to see where everybody is, what they're working on, and I know it takes a lot of it's a lot of work.
that's a possibility. The one that's even more in the forefront than that is the question that of what's often called verification.
Mm-hmm.
Can you prove that any of these people actually existed?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have data?
Mm-hmm.
I live at the University of Arizona, and there's a lot of consciousness studies and mediumship studies that are going on here, and at a lot of other universities and study centers around the country. And verification for scholars is a big deal. So if ever I want to interact with that group of people, and I would, there's probably going to come a day when somebody's going to insist that if you really want to be a part of this, we need you to verify. And I would, because I follow the Holy Spirit and Jesus as a Christian, I want them to tell me when it's time to do that. And I've asked the question, and I've been told not yet.
There you go.
So
Do you have any other projects or things? I think you already referenced that you're working on another book you're working on, maybe verifying. I didn't know if you wanted anything else that you wanted to.
yeah, I'm doing a podcast that launches on October the 4th. My podcast is called The Joyful Friar, which was St. Dominic's nickname. It's why I joined his order, because I believe in joy and joyful hope. Hope borrows from an unknown future and uh, anticipates goodness. Anxiety borrows from an unknown future and anticipates woe.
Mm, mm,
People that people that live in anxiety are always borrowing from an unknown future and presuming it's going to be as bad as today or worse. And
yeah,
and hope does the opposite. It borrows from an unknown future and says it's going to get better.
mm,
And I believe in living in joyful hope. So
yes.
that's my podcast is called The Joyful Friar. And then if people want to you know send me an email so I can see that they can subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, the travel went away. People quit hiring for speakers, and churches didn't want me because they were mostly locked down. So I love to teach scripture.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done line by line studies of the Gospels of Mark, the letters of St. Paul, the Gospel of John, and I'm starting a book that I want to kind of crowdsource. I want to do a Zoom meeting, maybe every couple of weeks, imagining how to put the Gospel of John on a stage as a stage play, like a Broadway
Wow.
play,
Wow.
because I believe that it was written to be uh, a script. I don't believe it was written to be a short story. Have you ever been in a play where you were handed a script?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in addition to your lines and the lines of the other people, it also has um, notes that tell you when to move across the stage and answer the phone or turn on the light or whatever. John's gospel is already written in that form. You can see all the stage directions. You can see Jesus walk to the front of the stage and talk to the audience,
Wow.
the fourth wall. So I'm working on a book that will say something like John scripture as a script, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping to start that project soon. And if anybody'd like to kind of crowdsource imagining how that might work, you know how on a Zoom call you can have the whole group together and then you can send people into small groups.
Yes.
I imagine having people read a chapter and then collectively imagine how you might create it on a stage.
Nice.
That's a
So,
project that's coming
Father,
up.
if you wanted me to, when you get to the point where you're looking for an audience for that to help with that feedback, at any time I could put that information in the description box under your video.
Yeah.
I know that your preferred way to be contacted is your website, correct?
Yes, through under the contact button on the bar at the top. If you hit on contact, it will pop up a form that just asks for your phone number, your time zone. Yesterday, I was supposed to be on a call with a woman in Australia, and I said it's not until the 27th, and she said it's the 28th or whatever it was. She was a day ahead. So it's important to know what time zone people are in.
Mhm.
And then I ask if they're going to ask me anything about the book, I say, please read at least one of them or listen to one of them first,
Yeah.
because I just don't have enough hours in the day to tell you things you could have already found out. But if you have questions after reading something, well, then please,
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
me know.
Yes. Okay. So I will make sure
And
you
please, no Facebook Messenger stuff. I just don't like Facebook Messenger. So I have the business Facebook and the YouTube channel and the
mm,
Instagram and all that, but I really prefer just email me
prefer the email through the website, through
through the
the
website. Yeah.
form on the website.
Yeah.
Is there any lasting words that you want to share with the audience?
Well, we didn't give the website name. It's nathan-castle.com. You'll probably put that somewhere
Yeah.
anyway, but it's my
Yeah.
name,
I'll have it
Nathan.
scrolling in the bottom. Mhm.
Yeah. The dash castle, castle.com. Well, do you remember the story of Ronnie, the young woman who was swept away in the tsunami?
Yes.
Um,
Remember.
I can almost quote her. We asked her that question. She was 12 years old when she was swept out to sea,
Yeah.
and in this big tragedy that killed 250,000 people. And she just said, it doesn't matter if you die in some colossally tragic event. You step out of that like you step out of dirty clothes and you go on.
Mm.
She said, it doesn't matter what your religion is. If you had one at all, you will survive your death. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And it's when you just said that, it's a reminder that you don't have to die to get stuck. We get stuck here.
No, I get a fair amount of people that contact me and say, I am stuck. Would you
Mhm.
help me? And I tell them, I'm the tow truck driver. I'll pull you out of the ditch, but I can't follow you down the road. So we can do one appointment and you can prepare for it by whatever way you do, however you pray your way into it. You use the hour that I'll meet with you, and we'll see. Sometimes that can help people get right to the point, and sometimes they'll say a thing that even if they're in regular therapy, they just if they have a weekly appointment, they might beat around the bush, and sometimes just being forced into a 1 hour thing can be helpful.
That is true. That is
Um,
true. And we know that your time, you have many, many, many things going on.
I do. I was awake in the night last night spinning, and I thought, stop it. All you need to do right now is sleep. All those things that you're thinking about will be there in the morning.
But when you sleep, you're working.
I know sometimes I am, but
Mhm.
yeah, but I have a very full, happy life, and I'm grateful to
Uh,
have shared a little bit of it with you today.
well, Father Nathan, regardless of status, income, or celebrity, I would have to say that you are one of the most impactful persons on this planet.
Well, that's high praise. Thank you.
Yes, you have managed to defy all the labels and divisions that could box us into a limited experience. Your
It's why
will,
it's called a universe. It means one.
yes,
One.
yes.
Same thing with the country. The first name in it, word in it is united.
Yes, like yes. So let me give you your flowers now. I believe in giving people their flowers before
Okay.
they die. So you are willing to stand alone in a world of traditions and limited thinkings and create your own space here on this planet. Add to the fact that you are one of the most non-judgmental people I have encountered. You take souls regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or religion, and you and your amazing prayer partners receive them all with love and counsel them into the healing they need. So your work is inspiring and courageous. You are a shining example for anyone out there who may be grappling with what they are drawn to do and may be insecure about their purpose. They have you as a model to look to stand up in their truth, regardless of what others think, lovingly.
Yes.
You are changing not only the spirit world, but the physical world as well through your ministry. I am absolutely honored that you have joined us today. And my heart is full when I say, I see God in you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your service. I'm elated.
Well, that's delightful. Thank you so much. And if I can be of help to you or your listeners,
Yes. Brittany says thank you. Margaret says thank you. So all my followers and subscribers will be looking at this, and thank you so much for all that you do.
all right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well.
Okay.
Talk to
God
you
bless you.
later. All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye bye.